At issue here are comments that Trump made after the 2020 election when he tried to overturn the results. Now, the judge is expected to make a ruling at a later date. All right, let's bring in our guest. Joining us to discuss, national trial attorney Michael Jaafar is with us, and retired police commander and host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King, joins us as well. Gentlemen, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me here on the program. Let's begin right there. You heard the arguments. They were laid out very well by the very talented attorneys in that election interference case. Michael Jaafar, I want to start with you. One side says, hey, the president was just engaging in political speech. He was doing what anyone would do, challenging the election and the election results. The other side is saying, well, you know, that speech might be just political speech, but when it's in the furtherance of a RICO case, whether it's in furtherance of a crime, then it's certainly not protected.
Well, yeah, absolutely. They had to argue in front of, and Judge McAfee, I feel bad for him because he had to do his homework and brush up on his constitutional law, and he had to discern the difference between a facial challenge and as applied challenge, right? So this is not exactly the easiest type of case to follow for a viewer, but basically what they're saying is it's exactly what you laid out, which, hey, he is allowed to have political speech. The Trump side is saying he's allowed to have political speech. Everything goes. And the other side is saying, well, not everything goes. If you're furthering a crime, if your intent was to break the law, it doesn't matter what your political speech was. You could say political speech, hey, I want to murder somebody. That doesn't mean that that's allowed because you're doing it on a campaign stump speech, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how Judge McAfee rules. My interpretation is I think he's going to have to let the case go along and let the facts bear out, because what the Trump side is saying is more, for me, a closing argument type statement, not as the case is moot on day one.
Yeah, Michael Jaafar, before we have to go to break, we know coming up tomorrow we're going to find out if Beverly McCallum will take the stand in her case. I think it's fraught with problems, but she seems like the kind of person that might want to tell her story. What do you think she might do, and what do you think the right thing to do is?
I think what she needs to do and what the right thing are the same, in my opinion. She needs to take the stand. The evidence of the cement being covered up in the basement and hindering the crime evidence, I think you have no choice because it's known that a crime was committed. You can't sit silent knowing that everybody knows that a crime was committed. It's just a question of what did you do? What did you intend? She has to take the stand. She's got those glasses on her head, Michael. She's got to put them on her eyes. She's got to take the stand and fight for her life, Michael, because she's going to jail for the rest of her life. She's an old woman if she gets convicted of this, and it's trending against her.
Yeah. All right, still with us to discuss, national trial attorney Michael Jaafar. And imagine he might be the one, Michael Jaafar, and I agree with Mike. This was so coordinated. This wasn't something that just came up. And I see this guy, Brendan Paul, as really maybe one of those little pieces that they can use to turn against him, because the more you have, the better. And they also see probably, perhaps, a RICO case coming down the line here.
There's a direct line from the case that was filed against him by Cassie to today, right? When the case was filed against him by Cassie, his former girlfriend or wife, everybody that looked at the case said, I would have never imagined that this would be happening with somebody like Sean Combs, right? And then all of a sudden, 7 months later, there's a coordinated, basically, raid by the feds, right? It's not a coincidence. She took the shine off of Mr. Combs. She made him a target. And we all know that once the feds make you a target, they're going to find something. And in this case, it looks like there was a lot of things, right? As a defense attorney, obviously, we're all trained to not say where there's smoke, there's fire. But Michael, thankfully, I'm not his defense attorney, so I could say where there's smoke, there's fire. It looks to me like this is the beginning of the end for him. He's probably looking at several decades in prison. It's a little bit premature, but I know the feds well enough by now to know that when we see these types of headlines, there's a lot backing it up, and there's a lot coming. And that witness, the mule, I was speaking to a client of mine 2 days ago who lives in Shaker Heights. It's a nice town in Cleveland. It's a very nice suburb, right? He's not going to last more than maybe 10 minutes of threats by the investigators. He'll turn.
Yeah, I agree. It's an upscale suburb outside of Cleveland. You're exactly right. And, you know, I agree. I mean, there's a lot more that the feds have and have been working with if they're going to have this coordinated of an event. All right, still with us to discuss, national trial attorney Michael Jaafar. And Michael Jaafar, it becomes more and more important, the ballistics issue. And they don't have the bullet that went through the victim, right? So they can't connect the bullet that killed him to this guy's gun. But again, what they do have is they have 9 shells right by where he says he was shooting. So he was shooting at them, at least he says he was shooting in their direction. So what do you make of that? The ballistics is a problem. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence.
I think there's too much reasonable doubt here, Michael. And also what I'll say is this is the type of case that when it goes to the jury at the end, it becomes a Rorschach test. The jury sees whatever they want to see. In an earlier block, we were talking about the potential of jury nullification. I think the opposite is going to happen here. I think these jurors are going to go into the box with hyper-politicized views, because everybody obviously on the southern border has a very, very strong opinion about this issue, right? They're going to go into the box with a hyper-politicized view, and they're going to let the facts fit into their narrative as what they think should happen, and that's unfair. I don't think justice is going to be colorblind in this case. I don't know how the jury is going to do, but that's why the voir dire process in a case like this is the beginning and end of what happens at the end of this case.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the issue of being tried by his peers and the folks in that jury and how they feel about this issue is going to have a lot to do with the determination at the end of the day. We have new details tonight in the case against Bryan Kohberger. Kohberger is accused of killing 4 students at the University of Idaho in November of 2022. Prosecutors allege that the defense has been making calls to potential jurors to ask about their knowledge of media coverage on the case earlier this week in preparation for their request for a change in venue. The state filed a motion for order prohibiting further contact with prospective jurors absent leave of court or by court order. In today's Talkback segment, we asked you, do you think the defense should be allowed to make these calls? All right, joining us to discuss still, Michael Jaafar and Mike King. Let's go to our first comment, gentlemen. All right, April says, wouldn't that be jury tampering and illegal? Michael Jaafar, I want to begin with you, because here's the deal. The defense is going to go for a change of venue. What they have to show is that there's a reasonable probability of prejudice to the client if they're tried in that jurisdiction. One of the ways they want to show that is that people have been exposed to information about the case. They hired an expert, a company called Trial Innovations, and they're the ones doing the surveys. So they're basically doing surveys, asking people, what do you know about the case? What have you seen? Have you heard this? Have you seen that? What do you think about this on behalf of the defense? Again, these are just people in the area. There's no real prospective pool yet. Of course, the whole community is. There's no specific pool. They're just calling folks in the community, which essentially are the prospective jurors. What do you think about this, Mike?
I have a very strong opinion on this, Michael. I absolutely agree that they should have the right to go down this line of inquiry and, if possible, move this case somewhere else. Look, I, as an analyst, obviously, I have colored an opinion on Kohberger, right? The fact that he turned his cell phone off, he drove, he did. I mean, to me, it seems to me like he is a villain, right? But with that being said, we have to defend our system. Our system is not a system if you're going to be tried by a lynch mob. Again, if I was related to these victims, I would hate Kohberger. I'd want to see him suffer. I would hate a person like me giving the opinion I'm giving, right? But obviously, because I'm not related to anybody, I can be objective. So I am fully in favor of the defense going down this line of inquiry. And no, it's not jury tampering. It needs to happen, and that's my opinion.